Yo,
Hey, Daffy.
how you doing, son?
Good. How are you? Hi, Sasha.
Hello, how are you?
Not too bad.
Oh, that's good.
Thanks for joining us, and everybody. Good evening. My name is Simon O'Connor. I'm the director here at the Museum of Literature Ireland. You're all very welcome to this evening's narrative event, which is to coincide with the launch of Molly's new exhibition, Frederick Douglass in Ireland. Although the museum is closed during lockdown, you can visit the exhibition online at molly.ie. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank sincerely Kieran Madden, Ragnar Almquist, and our partners in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Dennis Brownlee and the African American Irish Diaspora Network, and Christine Keneally of Quinnipiac University, who were a huge help and support in getting that exhibition off the ground. So thank you so much. Born into slavery in the early 19th century, Frederick Douglass remains one of the most important and influential figures of the American abolitionist movement. Douglass was an amazing character. He was a self-educated writer and activist, and he escaped his enslavement to publish a defining memoir, the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave. And this memoir brought him considerable notoriety and fame. And in its wake, he briefly left the United States. He traveled to the UK and then to Ireland. And Ireland was a country that really influenced him greatly. While he was here, he published a second edition of that narrative. And then he met one of his heroes, the Irish political leader and the famed orator, Daniel O'Connell. Douglas's time in Ireland is of lasting importance. And this year, here we celebrate the 175th anniversary of his visit and the role that Ireland played in his own life and journey. There's numerous events that are taking place online around the island and in the US, actually. So if you sign up for our mailing list, we can keep you abreast of those. For us here at the museum, I suppose the interest in Douglass lies particularly in his writing of himself and his creation of his own narrative, his writing of memoir. And memoir and the self play a huge role, as we all know, in Irish writing. And where writing about ourselves has traditionally been in book or physical form, increasingly, I think we see a new generation of Irish writers speaking both to their own and our identities through performance poetry, through song, through rap, and through digital media. And for this young generation of writers, performance plays a huge role in their work. And they're often speaking from newer Irish communities, from first and second generation immigrant backgrounds. So this moment, I think, really does feel like a genuinely exciting and significant one. Ireland is changing and Irish writing is changing as well. Now, October is also Black History Month, and to coincide with this and our exhibition, we're honoured to have two absolutely fantastic guests join us in exploring that important theme of narrative and performance, and hopefully to inspire some of you who are on with us this evening to explore that creative side of yourselves. Firstly, Sasha Terfous is one of Ireland's most exciting young spoken word artists. Sasha was born in the small rural town of New Ross before moving to Waterford in 2016. And since then, her career has really exploded. She's performed her work in so many different places, the Electric Picnic, Other Voices, all together now. For Dublin Fringe festivals like a Riot Girl, and she's performed with the RTE Concert Orchestra as well. This year, she was writing passionately on the Black Lives Matter movement and undertaking commissions for NUI Galway, and performed very close to our hearts in the online edition of Bloomsday this year. Sasha uses her work, she says, as a form of activism. And her latest project is a really, really beautiful video interpretation of her poem Identity, which you really must look at. It's produced in collaboration with the Adrian Brinkerhoff Poetry Foundation in New York. Our second guest this evening is Dafe Orugbo. And Dafe is one half of one of the most exciting hip hop bands in Ireland, Tebby Rex, who've created a stir not only at home, but in the US and the UK through their amazing high energy live shows and releases. So they had a debut album in 2019, The Young Will Eat the Old. which was critically acclaimed as one of the best Irish releases of the year. And then this year they released a beautiful EP, Brackets, and they're working back then to the studio to work on another major project, which will hopefully see the light of day in 2021. We'd actually scheduled Tebby Rex to play, to record a performance here in the museum just before this new lockdown Mark II. So hopefully we'll get them back in when we reopen. And Dafe also regularly works actually with schools and young children, helping them to explore their own narratives through performance and rap. So so thanks so much to the both of you for joining us this evening. I might start with you, Sasha. Just on that, on our Frederick Douglass exhibit. I mentioned he was a writer of the self and a really amazing speaker as well. So he was a performer of the self too. And how does that resonate for you today here in Ireland in the 21st century in the middle of a pandemic?
I think that in itself has so much meaning, and I think Frederick Douglass really kind of helped people see how words can truly set us free, and how words themselves can actually create our own freedom by simply writing down our experiences and sharing them and telling people our stories. It really does help other people to open their minds. And I mean, if you look at the history of Ireland, it's a very tumultuous history, you know, and it's, although on some levels it has been compared to that of the American slave, it's still a completely separate experience, but there's still a lot of pain there, and there's a lot of tears and blood, you know. And I think Ireland has always been a country known for its poets and its writers and its storytellers and its orators, and you know, as my grandmother would say, it's recitations, you know. And even yesterday, you know, my grandmother rang me and she went on a spiel about how when she was younger she used to go and see the recitations in the pub and stuff like that. It's a very Irish thing. So it's really great to see a man being celebrated for his writing in this country, even though he's not Irish. Does that make sense? I feel like sometimes Ireland can be quite attached to its name and its blood, you know. So it's really great, yeah.
Yeah, actually just on that, I mean, one of the things that certainly that memoir has a power to do, I think, is to show us lives that we didn't think existed as well, and ways of living that we didn't think existed. And do you find that with your own writing and your own performance then, that you're talking about things that a lot of people are really surprised about?
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, I think my poetry has kind of, in a way, almost surprised me more than anything, because through writing, I'm not only able to just share my story, but I'm actually able to discover what my story was, because up until I began writing, I had no idea. I had a complete lack of identity. I had no idea who I was or what I stood for, or who I wanted to be. And it was through writing and putting my emotions into words, putting my story and my experiences into words, that I was really able to reflect and say, wow, you know what I mean? Wow. And I think it surprised me with other individuals who I have performed with, even the piece Identity, which I will be performing later. I mean, all walks of life tend to connect. I mean, I remember I performed it for the Make a Move Festival down in Limerick, and it was an English guy. He walked up to me and he said, I'm actually an Irish Catholic and I grew up in London in the 70s. You know, so that poem had that distinct meaning to him. So I think that always kind of surprises me, even when I talk about my own experiences, the fact that someone who's had a whole different life to me in a whole different era can still look at it and say, actually, I know what that otherness feels like. And I have been that out of place, you know? Yeah.
And isn't that one of the great powers of true and good artwork as well, is that it will continue to enable people to identify with it in that way in perpetuity. It's great. Dafe, I might ask you a similar or nearly the same question. I mean, how important do you feel it is for us to remember these writers and these speakers like Douglass, and to tell, you know, younger generations about them?
I think Frederick Douglass is such a good example of the difference between understanding something at face value and then actually having a deeper appreciation for it, you know, in terms of like, especially because he would stand out from different slave narratives of that time, because he told it himself, like it was told by himself. At the time, other slave narratives are written by other people. So you have a kind of deeper connection. Like hearing his story from him, So I think that's so keen if you even look at things like music. And I think, Sasha spoke a little bit of identity, but if you are in a place, let's say somewhere rural in Ireland where you haven't met many Black people or people from different cultures, and you experience that through their art, through their music or their writings, I think that gives you a much better understanding than me saying there are people from different cultures that exist and they are important and valued as well. Because of course that's true. We understand that's true at like a face surface level. But I think much like what the kind of installation was talking about is that true writing and true art and true like shape these narratives of the self, you can break the boundaries between understanding and then truly caring at a much deeper level, So like I wouldn't have been super familiar with the story of Frederick Douglass prior to the installation, but obviously I'd heard it before. But upon looking deeper and then like hearing quotes and his own words, it resonates a lot more deeply with you. So I think that's what identity in art can do, and that's why I think it's so important.
Mm. And in terms of, I mean, something I mentioned earlier on was just this idea that, we have a lot of the time memoir and the identity in the history of writing here is within books. But then, you folks are talking about that through performance and through music. And that really excites me because it's all equally as valid. And in a way, the music side of it and the performance side of it is like a Trojan horse. It's like, the delivery device is really fast and it's getting to people really quickly. I mean, do you feel that by placing your stories within these performance contexts, that it makes it easier to validate, or it kind of makes people prick up and listen a bit more?
Look, I think if nothing else, music is like the great equalizer, So at the end of the day, a good song, a hot song is a hot song, It's like, even if you wouldn't openly like be the type to go pick up a book and read about racial injustices and stuff, you're gonna hear a Kendrick Lamar song on the radio. Like, you don't even get a choice to opt out of that. You're gonna hear these stories. I think that's where it really kind of shines through. So maybe it's not a thing of like people are necessarily more susceptible to listening to these stories when it's in a song, but more so it's just it gets out there more often and more regularly. And I think there's value in that.
No, I was just going to say that I actually agree with you, Dafe. I think it's more about kind of taking these stories and giving them other mediums to speak through. Because I mean, at the end of the day, not many people may have read Roots, and not many people may have read 12 Years a Slave, but how many people have seen it? I mean, you know what I mean? How many people have seen it? It's almost like a staple in Irish culture, even for the Irish communities to watch. It's because Irish people love they love a good sob story. You know what I mean? They love hardship and really they love people having to kind of push through the barriers and stuff like that. But how many of those people have read the book? And it's not that one is better than the other. It's not about that whatsoever. It's literally just about adopting it in a new way that more people can connect with and fit into their own lives. Not everyone has time to sit down and read poetry. Not everyone has the time to sit down and read a book, but you can always have a movie on in the backwards. You can always stick in your headphones and turn on a tune if you need to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We our plan this evening is to, I suppose, hand over to you folks, and I believe you're going to nearly interview each other and have a little chat with each other about your own experiences as artists and how you kind of narrate your own world, which is great. So people won't really have to listen to my voice for very much longer. And then I believe you're going to perform a piece for us each as well, which is great. And then just so the audience online know, you can ask questions as well. We're going to have a short Q&A. I'll jump back in probably at about 20 to 8, and then we'll fire a few questions over to Dafe and Sasha. So if you just throw questions into the Q&A, and hopefully we'll have time at the end to throw those into you. Great, cool. Thanks. I'll leave it to the both of you.
Great stuff. Sasha, will it make more sense than, I guess, for you to do your performance first, then we talk about it, I do my performance, then we talk about it, and then go into the Q&A section?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Sweet.
There. So the piece that I'm going to actually perform is a piece called Identity. And so essentially it is about me discovering my heritage and what it means to be mixed race in this country through the likes of media and news reports and kind of music and movies and stuff like that, and it really being a journey into myself. because of the fact that I didn't have that influence there growing up. So the piece is called Identity. I do not know what it means to be Black. My version of Black culture is cultivated by MTV and news reports. It's big booty bitches, blunts, and Bugattis. It's Black men dying in streets, oppression piercing their skulls, a white lobotomy teaching the ways of correct behavior. It's growing up without a dad. It's being part of the 51.2% of Black kids in the 90s who were fatherless, a white mom taking a comb through my hair because nobody taught her how to braid. It's 10 years of flat irons and chemicals because nobody was there to tell a little girl, your hair is as old as humanity itself. Each strand tells the stories of your ancestors. Each car represents Black history and the ongoing fight to keep growing, no matter how small the progress may seem. It's jollof rice and spiced fish at your best friend's house because mama don't know how to cook it, and it's asking why other kids call you monkey and why you don't look like them. It's screaming at a mother who did nothing but lay her life down for you. Why don't I look like the other kids at school? Mom, why do I look like this? Mom, why does the sun turn my skin so brown? Who am I? It's asking why your dad is like air. You know he's real. He is the reason life runs in your veins, but you have never seen him. It's a mysterious birthday card on a dreary day, pleading your return. Hushed tones and whispered confessions behind glass doors, revealing more secrets than shackled brown bodies jumping overboard. I am told my culture is Kool-Aid. I'm told my culture is watermelon Kool-Aid and chicken fried in Crisco. History books say it's barbaric traditions and voodoo-infused medicine. America tells me it's uneducated men and women with empty thoughts and even emptier lives. Their pockets full with money, almost as dirty as the color of their skin. Crack pipes handed down like family heirlooms. I am destined for failure. Not white enough for the white kids, not Black enough for the Black kids. Spice stings my tongue like the N-word thrown around in front of me by white kids, unknown to the fact that Africa is a me, it's a them. And together we are Africa. My hair straightened by the Western world and my skin faded by racism. I lose my identity inside of me. An endless journey of who I am and why. My reflection in the mirror speaks to me about my homeland. The girl staring back is more than just another light-skinned mixed girl who grew up in a white girl world. I am more than an identity lost in self-ignorance. I may not know what it means to be Black, but I sure as hell know what it means to be me. No, I messed up there ever so slightly, but
yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a testament to be able to perform on Zoom. You know what I'm saying? And like not be in the audience or see how people are responding. Like if you say something that's supposed to hit, like it's fire, but you can't even see people responding. So I assume everyone loves it. Hopefully not.
But later we'll see all the comments and they'll just be like, "Go home." Like, you already am.
But actually, I do have some questions about that piece as well. That's why you were going through, and obviously I've heard it a couple of times now. But just it's cool to kind of sit back and listen to it. I want to ask because I find like that's a very interesting thing coming from like someone who's like an immigrant, but like that mixture of having like a lot of love for your identity and who you are and being Irish, but also having a frustration with how that's maybe mistreated or affected you growing up, especially. So like, how do you even balance that as an artist and creative in terms of like trying to figure those two opposing things out?
I think in my personal life, I don't think it's something that I need to balance because I just am who I am. And I think that's been a journey in itself, accepting that, because definitely when I was younger, I mean, it was even little decisions I would make in my daily life that I would try and prove like my Blackness, my Africanness. I felt like I had to, because I grew up in this country with an Irish family who I love very, very dearly. And I have an Irish accent, and to be honest, I'm light skinned and I'm also white passing. When I have straight hair, I'm very white passing, and I'm fully aware of that being a privilege within itself. So I think that kind of struggle was more of a personalized struggle. It was more internal. And I think that also kind of reflected in my peer groups as well. When they would find out that I was mixed race, then the N-word would start to slip, the monkey jokes would start to slip, then the comments would come out, and that's when the bullying began. You know what I mean? So like, it's always been a little bit of a struggle to kind of balance it out when I was younger. But as I've gotten older, I've come to realize that, yeah, I am mixed race, and yeah, I do sound really Irish. And yeah, I do sometimes straighten my hair, and that's fine. And I don't have to leave my hair natural to prove to you that I'm not white. Because when I was younger, like even when I was younger, when I first started getting into, you know, hair and things like that, I was very afraid almost to wear anything other than like a 1B or a 1. So that's like, you know, like a black brown or like black hair. I was kind of afraid to wear anything other. I didn't want to wear blonde hair. I didn't want to wear ginger hair or any of these lighter colors, because I was aware that it almost made me look whiter than what I was. So now I'm at the stage where it's like I'm comfortable enough to say no, because I don't have to prove it to anyone anymore. This is my existence, you know?
What role do you think your art and your spoken word and poetry got you to being at this stage? Was it like something that like worked in tangent with one another, or was it a little bit more separate?
No, I think it was, I don't think I would be able to sit here and speak right now about my identity if it wasn't for spoken word and if it wasn't for poetry, because it was through writing. Like I said earlier, it was through writing that I really discovered who I was and what I stood for and who I wanted to be. And at the end of the day, before I started writing up until that point, I hadn't a clue. It was almost just like a watercolor painting I was just a piece of furniture. And I used to mirror people a lot. I used to really, especially when I was younger, I used to mirror people a lot. And I used to kind of mold myself into their expectation rather than what I was, you know?
Look, I think you made a very good point in terms of like mirroring people, right? Because obviously this is like, we're talking about the Frederick Douglass installation. While that's such a good, I think, aspirational role model for any Black person, or any person actually, you know, in terms of what they've done and the influence of the world. You mentioned MTV and big booty, you know, chicks and whatever, right? And it's like, yeah, because I think that is a funny thing where like, obviously representation brings with it its benefits, but then if you're molding yourself after things that maybe you wouldn't want to or not ideal, but that's a version of Black people you see on TV, maybe that complicates those situations, kind of finding your identity.
Yeah, it does, because like I think sorry, I was just trying to turn up my mic there. Is that better?
Yeah.
So I think it does kind of complicate things, especially like when you take, like I grew up in a small Irish town. There weren't many other people of color in that area. So I kind of did have to look to media. And it's this you have to keep in mind as well, the media, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s, whether it be movies or music or kind of TV shows and things like that, there's obviously different layers that this content has to filter through. So what ends up on your TV or what ends up on your radio is hand-picked. And it's very minimum content that you have to indulge in, especially in Ireland during those times. But even the content that you do have to watch that are about Black lives or Black people, Black content, it's done strategically. It's picked strategically to paint you a very specific picture, you know? So when you're looking to this media to discover that within yourself, all you see is this image. And it kind of starts this whole, well, do I want to be this? Like, I mean, like if you look at like R&B and hip hop, at least when I was growing up, a lot of it from the male artists that was on Irish television when I was growing up, the only women were the video girls. You know what I mean? So then as a female who likes hip hop and R&B, you're kind of like, well, is that my only place within that environment? And then you look at them and they're all similar shades, or which is an issue within itself. And then you start to think, well, is this the desired look? So it's like, it's hard. And it's so great now to see so many different colors and so many different shades of Black and brown and mixed on TV and in kind of like our stratosphere, because it really shows that like, there's not one way to be Black. And even in Ireland, I think there is this misconception that like, there's a specific skin color that you are if you're Black. And there's a specific way of talking, and there's a specific way of dressing and your hair and da-da-da. And if you don't fall into those rules that are set in place, but sure, you're not Black, you're basically Irish. Like you don't talk African. You don't look African. Why? Where'd you get that at? And then when you do, because you're mirroring their expectations of what they want from you, why are you talking like that? Sure, you're Irish.
It's funny because I think I have been told, like, I think before so many times where it's like, oh, you're basically Irish. I think it's said in like a complimentary way, because it's like, we accept you, which is great. But I think there are so many facets to identity these days as well, where like you should be able to be both comfortably,
Yeah.
But even speaking to like the idea of these different shades and colors, I feel like that piece you did is speaking to a couple of different groups. I think it's speaking to white people, but it's also speaking to perhaps maybe mixed people and Black people. So out of those three groups, maybe there's more that I'm missing. What would you want, like individually, what would you want their takeaway each to be from that poem? Like if they would take one thing away from what they just heard there, what do you want them to take away from that?
With all of my poetry, there's only one thing that I want the takeaway to be, and I want that to be intrigue. I want them to question themselves. And I say it all the time, and I've said it in like interviews and stuff like that before as well. It's like the one thing that I aim to do. I'm here to share my story and share other stories and kind of give you a little bit of a narrative. But I don't want to make you feel anything. The best that I can hope for is that you start to ask questions about your society, about your culture, about who you are as a person, whatever it may be. And even if you don't like the piece, I'm not here for you to like the poem. If you don't like the poem, that is fantastic. Let's have a conversation about that. Tell me why you don't like the poem. And that's even an accomplishment to me, because you felt something, you've had a reaction, and you've questioned it. And for you to come out and say, I don't like this poem because it paints this picture, because, it portrays something this way, that in itself is an accomplishment, because you've already had to ask that question of, why don't I like this poem?
Yeah. I feel, I think having a response to art is the main thing. You want to elicit some kind of response. Like, even if it makes people angry or they think it's terrible, like they feel strongly, and like you can go from there. That's a jumping off point.
There's actually, I can't remember the exact poet, but there's a really amazing spoken word piece up on YouTube. I think it's on Button Poetry. And the poem basically is called Why Don't Black Folk Ever Talk About Flowers and Poetry? So it's literally the whole thing. It's this Black girl, and she writes a poem because her dad basically turned around to her one day and said, how come you don't ever write poetry about pretty flowers? Why does it always have to be dark? And the thing about art is, it's not just pretty flower, Even sunflowers has this awful story behind it. Like, it has this really like interesting layers underneath yellow sunflowers. Do you know what I mean? By Van Gogh. And it's an amazing story, but that's the point. I think a lot of the time people look at art at face value and they're like, is it pretty? Is it not? And at the end of the day, it's like, it's not there to be pretty. That's the whole thing about art, is it's supposed to inspire you to ask questions,
That's it. And speaking of flowers, we're going to transition onto my performance. Guys, if you guys could pull up the thing I sent you with the lyrics, and I'll give it a whack of doing it.
I'll mute myself while you're performing.
No bots. I don't know if it was Simon or Lily who had the thing. Oh, okay. Y'all don't have it. 1 second. No worries. I think I can share my screen. Okay. If the host could let me share my screen, I can pull up the lyrics to get the thing done. Sorry about that, guys. 1 second now. The technical difficulties and that, you know what I'm saying?
Look, a day in the life.
I mean, look, man, we're all getting reacclimated to the whole Zoom and everything again, so it's cool, man. It's figuring out. It's gonna be just a heads up. I have edited this to be the clean version, so it might mess with the flow a little bit, but look, we'll be grand, right?
Left it absolutely filthy.
No, I think it should be G. But basically, I'm gonna do a little bit of my song "Lowest Eaters," which is on the album as mentioned. 1 second now. I'm only gonna, I think, do verse like 1 and 2, just to like, because rapping while a beat is very weird. But listen, we'll give it a whack. Okay. Hazy mist, smoking rollies in the back of an Acura, acting like we sober with the pigs on the back of us, swerving through suburbia, the bloody state of ya. Only urban to you, cultures, I'm the culture, you damn vulture. Your girl's eyes rolling beats, swear she ain't rolled me on the road near the forest, but she forged for his touch, just for none, now I'm busting your mama's house, smack the taste out your mouth. Take the biscuits and dip in, then dip them in the tea that I'm spilling, room spinning from the X in my system, pure sweating for a bop with my jaw swinging vicious. My girl crying on the phone, always swears she a victim because a friend got evicted. Purple hickeys on my skin, always bruised like a peach. Saw quick of the keys when I tweet. Black men don't cheat, sheesh. In the chorus, which I'm not gonna sing. I usually with a partner who like sings the chorus. If I'm a terrible singer, so breeze past that. Second verse. I'm drowning in these sheets, purple lens around my neck, kind of difficult to breathe. Yeah, I'm gasping for some air. Why the hell would I leave? Always surface slow when she tells me to leave. Alan Grafton, we grafting, and then loses for the art. Why you leaving me a shine? I'm an actor trying to start. Starting on my Insta, we got to flex for the gram, scooping up a couple grams like a pillar of sand. Sandman working heavy, feeling sleep at the wheel. Car starts spinning, I can tell if it's real. Crashing through the building, the world's a haze of brick. Takes the copper on my lips, sirens wail in the distance as my blur starts to vision. I see nothing. I'm just nodding off to sleep, slow rhythm owes beats as it softens often. The chorus once more. And then the final verse. I see warm summer nights just playing on the street, little footy with the boys and a couple scraped knees, escape from the doorstep, rapping with the quick step, rapping on the yard, 8 Mile, but there's 10 of us, connections kind of tenuous, but screw it. Beast class talking about some ducats and shy when we lock in, lockers beside the girls that we liked with our hands in our pockets, all nervous, I see nothing, just the dark. I see stars manifesting the abyss. I see times I persist and regret. I see the ragged slits upon my wrist. I see matted hair of goddesses. I see God looking down upon us, sis. I see nothing, just the dark. I see the end all the way from the start. Watch. And that's the song. And the title of the song is Lotus Eaters, which is basically based on the like kind of Greek myth about this plant that essentially they would eat it and you'd be like kind of stuck in a kind of trance state. So the song essentially is about a car crash. Because I wanted to kind of condense, I think, let's say some kind of like, I wanted to kind of map out a couple years of my life and being a very kind of angry, frustrated, maybe delinquent kid to kind of learn to appreciate what I have more. But I think I kind of did it through and this is where we'll talk a little bit about kind of like framing your own story. I kind of did it through the kind of framing device of it being a car crash and someone seeing their life flash before their eyes. So it starts off very angry, very pissed off, very annoyed about maybe being Black in a culture area, like, you know, somewhere a little bit more rural, which is where I'm kind of from. About like kind of girl troubles and trying to make it as an artist and like be this thing and flex that you're not, to a point where in the second verse where you kind of see there where it's like car starts spinning and like the car crash happens, then the whole final verse is this person kind of seeing their life flash before their eyes and wanting to stay alive, wanting to keep those moments, but of course it's too late now, you know. So that's the general breakdown of that song. But yeah.
No, it really is like a great piece, you know, it really is.
Thank you.
What was your kind of, obviously, you know, you've just described what it's about, but what was your kind of inspiration for it? Was there a moment that kind of made you think that made your life flash before your eyes, you know?
You know, it's funny because I always find, I think the whole album as well has this whole kind of Greek myth thing. So I always love the idea of taking these big kind of grand, you know, surreal, supernatural ideas and then humanizing them, you know? So I think there are so many people who live with so much regret that if they had the option to eat a lotus flower, they would. They would stay in that trance state of that one moment for as long as possible, you know? So I wanted it to be kind of just a manifestation of regret, you know? I think in many ways, when we're talking about kind of like shaping identity through speaking about it and talking about it, I don't want to be a person with regrets. I feel like if I put all my regrets on paper, they'll, I guess, evaporate or vanish to a certain degree. It's something that becomes something I can then manage, you know?
Yeah. And you know, like it's really interesting that you bring up like the regret in your experiences, because like it is one of the kind of the core components of a person's identity. It's how your experiences kind of shape you and how you reflect upon them, you know, and how you kind of tailor your approach in the future as well.
Yeah, I think even back to the whole Frederick Douglass thing where like his work was so essentially being like its own self-told slave narration, because I think there's such a massive difference between hearing, for example, and this is a horrible example, of course, difference between hearing someone was whipped or someone talking about the sting of being whipped, you know? I think that's where you can really kind of dig into personal experience with art, you know, where things become very tactile, you know, like not outside, let's say, like it's like if you're writing a song about a breakup and getting dumped, for example, something like a lot less serious. Instead of saying like, you know, in however many words that you got dumped and the relationship ended, but you start talking about things you notice, because people pick up on those small things, you know. It's like what it smelled like, what the rain felt like on your skin, like what were you thinking about, what could you see or hear in the distance, like, because that's how the kind of mind kind of wanders as well. So I think that's a really great way to make art a lot more compelling, where you're kind of engaging all the different senses. So for this song, I was like, I just want to throw every sense in there, if possible, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I want you to see what I'm seeing, taste what I'm tasting, hear what I'm hearing. I want it all to kind of mesh together as much as possible. I think that's the way to make like a compelling work too, you know?
Definitely, and I think it's something that I try as well with poetry. Is I almost try to paint with it, you know, and it's always like sometimes even some of the pieces that I've written in the past, like I've literally just looked at a painting, you know, and I've tried to
for sure. For
put
sure.
myself in the painting, you know, and it's really great because it helps you kind of give that deeper understanding of other forms of art as well, you know, because I think as an artist, you need to be self-aware, but you also need to take the responsibility that comes with an artist, and that is exposing yourself to the world. You know,
I think that's so like true, because I think like art can give you this really visceral reaction more so than a simple than simply knowing, because I think there's such a big difference between knowing and understanding. And of course, like even based on your poem, like I'm never going to understand your unique experience growing up in Ireland of being kind of mixed race and experiencing those things, you know, but I have a much better understanding hearing you shape that world than I do simply if I were just to know those things, you know, like
yeah.
It's a lot easier to kind of see it through your eyes and then get a sense of what that means and why it resonates, you know?
Mm-hmm. But it's the same way, like I can't imagine what it would have been like for you to grow up in Kildare, you know, and kind of like how your experiences shaped you in this country either, you know?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, like, yeah, I'm like, I always find it so funny because it's like, I always say that I could tell you stories that would shock you, that would shock some, and to others be very tame, you know, because
Yeah.
obviously it's a whole range of stuff. But then it's like, in terms of writing, you know, I think that's so, like, when it comes back to that kind of writing, whether it's like rap or spoken word or a story or even a painting, it's, you know, well, maybe not that say painting, this doesn't really apply, but it's like, how do you take that baseline experience and heighten it? Like if you're writing a poem and you want something to really impact, you really want a certain, like a sentence or word or experience to really impact it, be like a lot more punchier than the rest of the poem. How do you highlight that? What do you do to make that stand out?
Oh God, that's a good question, isn't it? I feel like I don't have like one specific approach, because sometimes, and you'll know this as well from writing lyrics, sometimes all you have to do is change a word, and that's all it is. Sometimes it's literally whipping out a thesaurus and just sitting there for ages, going through words, going through the dictionary and finding a word and just repeating the same line over and over and over again until you go, that's it. That's, do you know what I mean? And then other times it's like, oh, maybe this specific part isn't real enough. Maybe it's not raw enough. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost like you have to tailor your approach with each piece, I think. You know?
How would you make it more real? If you feel like, look, I'm only hitting the surface level of where I want to go. I need to go one level deeper. How do you do that? How do you make it more real?
I put myself, well, I think for a long time, being completely honest here, you know, I think for a long time I used to put myself back in that place. And it was for some of the pieces that it required for me to go back to that place. It was dark, you know, and it wasn't healthy. And I think that's what I did for a really long time, is I just sent myself to a really dark place. Now I wasn't doing it for attention or for pity or anything like that, but it was literally just for a poem. I mean, I have a piece called To Be the Devil's Wife, and it's about being spiked on a night out. And to sit down and write that piece, I had to put myself back into that place of fear that I felt the week after. and the guilt I felt for not reporting it, and so on and so forth. And it was a really dark, like horrible, tumultuous place that really affected me, and did for months afterwards, you know, because it was almost like you're reliving it. But I think now, because I've learned to manage my life and my art in a way that they actually complement each other. Because I used to have this notion, right? I feel like a lot of people have this idea that like all artists are tortured and stuff like that. And I think for a long time, I had to learn that I cannot continue to weaponize my mental health issues for the sake of art, because the only person being shot down here is me. And if I'm not around, neither is the art. Even from that, like, you know, selfless kind of point of view, just to be like, just so there's art, I need to stop. And I think now, because I am a lot more stable and I'm a lot healthier as a person, and I'm a lot happier, I think if I look, I think I can reflect back on my experiences now without having to kind of method act in a way. You know what I mean? So it's like,
yeah, I think you're spot on there, because it's a whiplash. You ever see that movie Whiplash, the whiplash mentality, like, which I always find it so interesting, because like in many ways I'll watch that movie and be like, because in the end of the movie he gets what he wants, right? He finally reached the level of like mastery in his art form, that he finally gets there, but in the process he's after having to like break himself and relationships and like, you know, distance friends, you know. And I think you're so right, like it's that image or idea of the artist as this tortured being, and that doesn't necessarily have to be true, you know. Like obviously that song is quite heavy, that I just did for that reason, but I find it is really funny because a lot of times when people listen to our stuff, it's like, oh, this is very like funny and there's a lot of levity there, you know, and they expect something a lot more darker or serious, but at the end of the day, it's like, that's me as a person most of the time, and that's where it's going to be at most of the time, you know. So I think it's that kind of finding that kind of balance there.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about balance.
Hey, Simon.
Hi, Simon.
I've appeared back on again. With I suppose to start the Q&A, and the performances were really great. Thanks so much for that. It was a real pleasure to be able to sit and listen to them. And both of you so different as well in what you're dealing with. I mean, Dafe, it was fascinating just when you were talking about using, kind of being really interested in using big kind of epic structures and the kind of Greek epics, and, you know, that about the Lotus Eaters. And it's probably not talking out of school, but you know, the name of the museum, Molly, there's a little bit of a Joyce reference in that acronym to Molly Bloom, who was, you know, the kind of the main female character in the novel. But Joyce also possibly got the name Molly from the drug Molly, which is in the Odyssey as well. So it's like, you know, and the fact that you're talking about so much of the color of the world around you within these kind of really, really big, within this really big story in that piece. I think it's, you know, I would say this in my job, but it is actually really, really Joycean, and it's brilliant to see like kind of that coming through just in completely different ways through
Simon, that's gas, because the line in the chorus, the longest way round is the shortest way home, is a Joyce quote, you know. So firing all cylinders there, you know what I'm saying? Like honestly, it's that's synergy. That's synergy, that is.
Absolutely. And Sasha, when you were talking there about kind of saying the lines over and over again and changing a word until you can, you know, until it just sounds right. I mean, so many writers that I've spoken to talk about that as well, about writing out loud. And actually reading what they're writing out loud, which was really surprising to me. Like, I'm not a writer, and to hear that that's how people did it. And you'd assume that, you know, performance poets or musicians, obviously, and rappers are doing that. But that actually it's common amongst writers as well to be hearing how it sounds read.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, like, even I'll write a piece and I'll like record it on my voice memos on my phone, and literally, and it sounds insane, but I think when you, especially with performance poetry as well, you have to know when you are a performer, an oral performer, you need to know what your work sounds like. You need to know, and you need to hear it so many times. You need to really hear what the listener is hearing, what your audience is hearing. So like a lot of the time, if I have a new piece and it's going to be, because not everything is for the public, sometimes, you know, I write for just me, but if this is going to be something that is going to be published or released, a lot of the times I'll record it on my voice memos, and when I'm going to the shop and when I'm going around my house, I'll pop in my headphones, and instead of listening to my playlist or listening to my book on Audible or whatever, I'm listening to my own voice. And I'm critiquing it inside of my head, think that line has been bugging me for the last 4 days because it don't flow right, and I gotta change it because it ain't right. Like it ain't. And maybe at the time I'm like, this is amazing. Like it's perfect. Like, you know what I mean? But it's until I've heard it 5 or 6 times that I can really go, no, it's not. Like this needs work.
And are there any, Sasha, are there any other poets, or I suppose writers, whose work hits you in that way as well, like the sound of it and whose work that you love, even listening to yourself reading?
Yeah, it depends, because I'm interested in poetry as a whole. So I mean, like, as far as kind of audible poets, so like, poets that you actually listen to that are performers, they're spoken word poets. I think Kate Tempest is a phenomenal performer, absolutely phenomenal. Lebo Mashile, she's a South African poet. She is absolutely brilliant, and I had the honor of being able to perform one of her poems, Home, as well, or Tell Your Story, sorry, it was what I performed. And she again writes about her experiences and kind of about using your words to really tell your story about your identity and everything that you've been through. As far as kind of like page poets, I feel like that's the term now that's been thrown around for like non-spoken word poets, page poets. I love Maya Angelou, and I feel like she's a bit of a mixture of the both, because you have your visual recordings and your audio recordings there of her reading her work, but then I have so many books over there. I have her actual her set of books as well, and like she's just an amazing writer. And even like when you're reading, like I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, like it just flows like poetry. Like the book is like one long extended poem, like the entire series is, you know what I mean? And another poet on the opposite scale of that is actually Sylvia Plath.
Sylvia Plath slaps.
I admire Sylvia Plath so much. I discovered Sylvia Plath, I think, when I was about 16 or 17 while I was in school, and everyone hated her because they're like, oh my god, like she's so fucking depressing, like da, da, da. And I was like, she's actually really, like, if you actually sit down, you listen. And I think as someone who struggles with mental health as well, she was able to kind of visualize and put everything that I was struggling with internally onto a page, and for me to actually sit down and like reflect on it. And it really kind of gave me that push to write about my own mental health and to kind of, work my way through that, So yeah, those are my faves off the top of my head.
And how about you, Dafe? I mean, do you go to other writing for influence as much as, I mean, you kind of clearly do, but even more so than music, or are there writers that you dig around in?
So what I'll say when it comes to writing is that I'll hear something, or if I'm like in like a project, like a bigger kind of project or album or EP mode, I'll hitch on something, I'll become obsessed with it. So it's like, for example, I wouldn't like typically like read a lot of poetry, but like right now, like that Mary Oliver poem I went to shore in the morning is like in my brain constantly 24/7 now, all the time, because like it's a massive influence for the next kind of project I'm working on. Or even, back at the time I was making the last album, like, I went back to the Odyssey, I went back to the Iliad, and I was reading these things in like certain words and quotes, and it's like honestly every day I would wake up and I would read the Emily Dickinson poem, Hope is the thing with feathers. Every day I would wake up and read that poem. So I kind of like build it into becomes like almost a part of my DNA for like the next couple of months, but that's like what I would do on the poetry side. So I get obsessive when it comes to it, And in terms of artists, like I always say this, it's always like a weird one, but I love Kate Nash. And when we're talking about the self, I feel like many times I have a better understanding of Kate Nash than I do of myself as a person, because she puts so much of herself in the music, from personality to quirks to frustrations. And it's more important about getting almost a sense of her than it is even being a good song. Like she'll sing songs that's so sad, and she'll sing it on purpose a little bit weaker than she could, because she's just been crying in the context of the song. So her voice isn't as strong. It's like, it's not about getting the perfect sounds, but again, an imperfect sound to communicate a message, which I think is so compelling. Like that's what I would love for my art to hit. Obviously, listen, Gambino, obviously Kendrick, loads of people like that. But I would say Kate Nash is like probably like one of my top influences.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And we're gonna open up to the audience online now with for questions. One of my colleagues, Lily, is going to come in and manage all that. So so if anyone has any questions, throw them in. The one of the things that that I was thinking about as well, that kind of difference between maybe the two performances there was that idea of, you know, there's so much color of the everyday in yours, Dafe, and then Sasha, yours was so directly about kind of, I suppose, like profound experience of identity, and you were talking about, you know, the kind of beautiful sunflowers with the dark story underneath it. But do you ever get tempted to just maybe do the beautiful sunflowers?
And you know, like, I think sometimes I do get tempted, you know, and it's not a thing where it's like, oh, like it's not that I actually want to do it, but sometimes, like, when you're in the middle of like a really like important piece, like a piece that's important to you, you just kind of think to yourself, like, why do I do it? Like, why do I do it to myself? Like, I'd be much better. Like, I wish I could sit down. And sometimes you do think like, oh, I wish I could sit down and just write about pretty flowers, you know, and just write about. And then there are times where I've sat down and I've tried to, you know, write about the sun being just a beautiful sunset. And it's like, it's just taken a whole other direction, like a whole other direction. So it's like, I don't even possess it when I try. And I think part of that is I'm an overthinker. I overthink absolutely everything, you know, and no matter how hard I try, it's just my mind runs like 5,000 miles a minute. So even if I try to sit down and just admire the sun for what it is, it turns into like maybe a piece about like what the sun was feeling that day and why it wasn't shining as bright, and you know, like it's, yeah.
And then Dafe, with yourself, I mean, do you feel kind of in the other direction now that there's a kind of a greater pull to make art that's kind of very political, or that's kind of really speaking to the kind of the darkness of the here and now that some people might be seeing?
Also, shout out to VJ Evans. There was a comment there about enriching the Stanley poetry experiences. Hope you enjoyed it, VJ. Oh, for sure. But I think, you know, I think inherently, like, and not to be too, I think my internet's gone off. Sasha, can you hear me fine?
Yeah, no, I can hear you perfect.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I was saying it was unstable. Not to be too English student-y about it, but I think this inherent existence is like political, right? It's like to do these things, to think, like, let's say, for example, art is valuable and essential to people's existence. I think that's in itself political, right? To even do a song about like drinking, which I think is in the new EP, but it's about the kind of different facets of drink culture and how it can both be potentially like a toxic thing, but also a good avenue to make friends and have meaningful experiences. Like, that is inherently political. I think all of this stuff is super important. Like, even you probably putting this together, Simon, is like, that's your own personal odyssey. Like, you had to pull the things and strength to get this done in time. Like, did you like solve world hunger? Like, no, none of us do. But on a day-to-day, these are the important things that shape us. I think that's just as valuable as well.
I'm not going to hog the questions now, but we've got a few coming in. One is, have the guys missed performing live, or have you found it easy to adapt to Zoom?
Dafe, do you want to go first, or?
Oh, what?
Do you want to go first, or?
No, you hit it.
I miss it. There's nothing like you know, half a panic attack before you get on stage. Like, there's nothing like that rush. Like, I get very nervous before I perform. But it's like, even like, I think when you're a performer, you kind of build up your own little rituals before you actually perform. Whether that's, some people, I know people who perform, they drink pints of water before they get up on stage. So that when they get up there, they need to pee, and then they just wham it out, and it's amazing, and they run off. I'm the kind of person who needs to like take their 5-10 minutes to themselves, breathe, you know, recite the pieces over and over and over again, even go through the intro. Hi guys, my name is Sasha. So it's like you even miss those little rituals, those little habits that you have before you perform. And I think now it's great that, you know, we live in a day and age where we can still, you know, connect with people from our own homes and kind of reach out to individuals and make them think, you know, without having to be in the same room. I think that's absolutely fantastic. But I think it really does highlight the human need for connection and interaction and just human contact.
Yeah, and I think the energy as well that performers get from an audience and how they kind of put that in the bank for when they're working without an audience is important. So hopefully we won't be Zooming forever.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. But how about you, Dafe? How have you found it?
It sucks. Like it's funny because like I think my favorite part of being an artist, I think, was performing live, and that live performance aspect that was so important to me. Like we would be making songs and we'd be like, okay, is this gonna slap live? Is this gonna go live? Yeah. I think we've in many ways adapted to this kind of Zoom situation amazingly. And I think it's really cool that people are logging in and watching performances and they're being hosted by the likes of like Molly. And I think like that's so valuable because people need this, you know, like I think people need this to do things like lockdown and to understand that to kind of like get value. Like there's so much value in art, you know. I think look, we're sharing meaningful experiences whatever way we can, which is amazing. And this is what we got to do. But yeah, damn, I do miss it. I definitely do miss it for sure.
Yeah.
Another question that we have come in is, do you have any tips to overcoming writer's block?
Yo, you gotta be comfortable being terrible. You gotta write some trash stuff and just write it and then be like, this is bad, I'm never gonna use it. And then write some more trash stuff. Because that's all you can really do, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think when I started doing shows and performing music, I was bad. I'm not like a humble, oh, I was bad. I mean, I was bad. My music was bad. My art was bad. But we just joked a lot on stage and we were just kind of friendly and we got a couple more gigs off that. And then we got better down the line. I think being good is something you can do whenever. You could become a super famous spoken word poet at the age of 18 or 40. You know what I'm saying? Like, just keep doing it. You figure it out.
Yeah, I think I do have some tips. Other than that, I think that's the most important by far is just being comfortable with being bad, because you're gonna be bad for a long time before you even get any way good. I think a lot of the time though, writer's block kind of comes from our environment, comes from like a stale environment, in the sense of like, especially now when you're sat down, you're writing day after day after day, or every time you write, you're sat in the same space, you know, and you're looking at the same four walls, and you know, that's not how inspiration comes, you know. So sometimes it's good to get up, to go for a walk, to, you know, I know it's a lot harder now, but even just to change your environment, even for a little bit, you know, to go to your local park, go for a cycle or a walk in your 5K area, get some fresh air. I mean, if you have you don't have to redecorate or anything. If you have the means to do it, I mean, go ahead. It's completely up to you. But try and take yourself out of your comfort zone as much as you can. And I think that'll like really, really kind of like, it'll spark something off inside of you, because you'll learn something about yourself that you never knew was there, you know?
Yeah.
Also, I think we got, is this froze? Am I frozen again?
We can hear you, Dafe.
Hello?
Hello? Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, my connection doing numbers.
No, it's perfect now.
We can hear you. Well, Daffy's coming back in. Sasha, yeah. There's a question that's come in here. Has the recent BLM movement awoken an important conversation in Ireland, or highlighted the big part that people of colour in Ireland play in the arts?
Yeah, I think in a way it has. I don't think that, see, it's strange because even saying that, you almost feel like you have to be careful with what you say, because you know who your majority is, and you don't want, you know, for it to come across, you know, in a negative way, and you don't want people to get the wrong impression. But the reality of it is, and still to this day, regardless of, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, people of color in this country are overlooked on a daily basis. And that just comes down to always having to be the biggest smile, in the room, and you know, the strongest handshake and the friendliest hello, and that's just what it is. I think now people are more open to looking into people of color and the content that they create, whether it's art, whether it's technology. There are some amazing entrepreneurs out there, young Black men and women, or even, you know, other people of color in this country, brown girls, brown boys, everyone in between, that are out there coming out with amazing technologies and kind of websites that really benefit us in our daily lives. And I think it's great now that people are finally realizing that they have been overlooking talent. They have been overlooking skill, you know? And on that note, I do also want to raise the point that even if a person of color is not talented and they're not skilled, they are just as important, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
It's just as valuable, and you should still look to them for advice, still look to them for information, because everyone has a story to tell, but everyone has a piece of knowledge that they can impart, whether it's a story from when they were younger that will make you reflect on your life, or a piece of technology that will make your daily life a lot easier.
Yeah.
Also, Sasha, did you see the question in the comments? I don't know if I was booted out. If you answered,
I do. Will I read it out, or?
I think it's really good. I think that's like someone's really taking the time. I know we're kind of running over time, if that's okay, Simon. But I would love to hear your take on that, Sasha.
Sorry. So the question is basically, do you think poets and generations will deliver directly or indirectly forever, as long as poetry is made? Because I agree, we need to face the details. So I think, I don't know, because like, I think it'll be, Daphne, what's your opinion of this?
You know, honestly, I feel like maybe this is me, but I feel like the most compelling art is usually now, because once again, there's no hard and fast rule to do anything here. Like, all what we're given is opinions of different angles or perspectives. But I do feel like there's something about an indirect message that kind of almost weighs heavier when you kind of understand it. Because to speak about, let's say, something like discrimination that we experience, it's like, it's so direct, and it's something that like can be done very well. But if you can like kind of synthesize that through something else where almost everyone can feel, and that's why things like, you know, metaphor is so good in poetry, where it's like, if you get insulted, it's like biting or it's cutting. It's like, obviously you're not cut, but it stings in the same way, and then you can kind of relate to that feeling. I think, especially when you're talking about things in metaphor, where it's like, you know, like I said, I'll never get to experience your life story, and you can't ever experience mine. I think there's a way of going about it with indirectness where I can, at least to a certain degree, feel it more than I would by simply hearing it from you. So I think both work, you know, but I feel like there is value.
I think that's why I'm kind of torn as well, because there's some amazing poets out there whose work kind of solely survives on metaphor. For instance, Sylvia Plath. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge part of her writing is metaphor and imagery, you know. But then there are other great poets as well that you know, metaphor isn't the number one place. Some of the top spoken word poets in the world right now, they minimize the metaphors. They're more direct, they're more blatant, they're more indignant, they're just straight to the point. They're out there. If you go on YouTube, I mean, some of the videos that have 6 and 7 and 8 million views are just so just to the point. But at the same time, I think that's why it's so hard to kind of answer, because I feel like there is no right answer, because it's art, right? And that's what we're talking about. We're talking, at the end of the day, whether it's poetry, whether it's music, whether it's film, we're talking about a concept. And there's no right way to conceptualize art. There's no, I mean, of course you can go to college, but even at that, like, you know, it's not like, this is how you become an artist, because there's so many different forms of art, even within poetry. There's so many different types of poets. So I think to say whether or not they will, like whether generations to come will become more direct with the poetry or more indirect, I can't answer that question, because there is no answer, you know, there just isn't.
We have a lovely comment here, which says, thank you. You both really enriched my understanding with your poetry and experiences. And I think regardless of the means by which it's doing it. That's really the goal, and I think that's the best work that any of you can do. And I think that's totally what you've done this evening. So probably a good spot to finish on. Just to thank you both for taking so much time to speak with us, to perform as well, and just to give us that insight into the way you're both working, and for enjoying chatting with each other so much as well. You're a great sport, so thanks so much, and thanks everybody for joining us this evening. Take care.
Yo, it was a pleasure, man.
Always.
Take care. Thanks, Sasha. Thanks, Dafe.
Bye.
Enjoy. Be safe.
Stay safe.
Wash your hands. Be healthy.
Wear a mask.